In the wilderness of life, we can never be too prepared.
You're listening to Wilderness of Life, a podcast focusing on the topics of health, sustainability, and adventure. I'm your host, Jen Dono, and in this episode, the first episode, I discuss living a zero-waste lifestyle with Paredown Home co-founder Katelin. Follow Katelin on Instagram at Paredown and find her blog and zero-waste lifestyle products at paredownhome.com. Katelin, you have moved a lot in the past, and one of the things, well, I shouldn't say a lot. How many times have you moved in the recent, few years?
Since we've started Zero Waste, this is our first move, but we're moving again this year. My husband's in the Air Force, so we tend to move every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and to be specific, this is up in Canada.
Yes.
Right, and so you went from the East Coast over to the West Coast recently?
No, we went from the West Coast to Central, or maybe it's Central East. We're in Toronto now. We were in Victoria.
So you have just a familiarity with different landscapes, I guess.
Yes.
So, I don't get a lot of comments on my YouTube videos, but the ones that I do, especially when they're around zero waste, generally have to do with access to opportunities to reduce your waste, such as bulk bins and different recycling programs. And I always have a tendency to think, well, that's silly because I live in rural Washington and I still can pull this off. I feel like anyone can. But at the same time, I totally recognize that that's really not the case 100% of the time. So what has been your take on, or your experience as far as access to the ability to remove waste from your life?
Well, my experience has been really positive. And I think, and I try and be the fact that other people don't have the same access that I do, or the resolve to stay committed to, the zero waste attitude, I guess. But going from large city to large city, there tends to be a lot more access to resources. So I've been very lucky, but I will say that I've had to do the legwork at each, in Victoria when we were there, I had to actually search different recycling facilities and so that it didn't cause me stress. I would often, we had a questionables bin, and who was recyclable but not recyclable through municipal programs went into that bin. And then just at the end of the year, I found out where to bring stuff, and you just have to do it once. And I had to do that again here in Toronto. So the information isn't necessarily readily available, but I have found that if you want to find solutions, you can.
And as far as businesses go, how did that look for different grocery stores, markets, farmers markets? Was that something that you still had access to? And if you didn't, how did you find a workaround where, I don't know, when it felt impossible, like you said, the resolve, that's not everyone has that resolve.
Yeah.
How did you find it within you to just keep going?
Well, I think it's just about changing your mindset. And I think that's the biggest ongoing struggle, at least for me, because we still exist in the same consumer-driven society. But I realized very early on that I shop at the traditional grocery stores. So I was very nervous about moving to Toronto because it's a new place and I wanted to keep my commitment to zero waste. And I think selfishly, on my website, I started a where to shop cities guides, and I've asked people across Canada to email me where they can shop zero waste, because in the back of my mind I know I might end up in that city. So it's sort of a useful tool for everyone else, but also very useful for me. And Toronto, the Where to Shop Toronto page was already quite populated. And I think that there's a lot of farmers markets here, which I found quite surprising. And in Toronto, they've got a lot of these they're produce and flower shops, and you build a relationship. If you shop at the same places, you build a relationship with the suppliers and the business owners that they're willing to accommodate you. So they know me when I come in, and they allow me to shop out of the flats when they come in. They often pre-package a lot of stuff, like cucumbers, they wrap them all up and things like that, and they know it's me, and they let me shop right out of the flats. So.
That's a good point, building relationships. One of the things that has really that's been beneficial for me with the zero waste movement or change in my lifestyle has been being more assertive as a consumer and making sure that people know, I guess, expressing what it is that I'm interested in or what I'd like as a consumer.
And it's confidence as well. Like, it took me 3 or 4 months to gain enough confidence to try shopping with my containers, and looking like the way that I would approach it now, it doesn't scare me anymore. And the idea of someone saying no doesn't, cause me to, freeze and not try. Like, I just try, and I'm confident because I know why I'm doing it. And I find when you have that confidence, people are less likely to say no to you.
Are you shopping with bags and I call it bags and jars shopping? Is that what you do?
Yes.
So now, are you bringing in actual jars, having the weight and everything like that, and then checking out?
Yes. So I shop at, I have 3 different places I shop at. I shop at a little produce shop, which I get, all of my fruits and veggies at. I shop at a butcher store. Now, these are both within walking distance. We made a very conscious decision to live in a walkable neighborhood, and we had to downsize drastically to be able to afford that, but the payoffs they're huge. So I walk to a butcher shop with my container. They also have bread there and loose egg with my jars, and they tear them. And the other place that I shop, I will go to a conventional sort of grocery store maybe once every 6 weeks to get like the Heinz glass bottles of ketchup, because we can't live without that, and a few random things like that. And we've decided that we just won't buy dairy for the household, and that hasn't been, it was an adjustment, but it's nothing we miss anymore.
Now, you're plant-based. You don't eat meat, but your family does.
Yes, and they eat a lot less meat, but they do still eat meat.
So you've made some adjustments just beyond reducing waste within your home. You're also making adjustments as far as your diet, that type of thing.
I think once you start on this path, it opens you up into so many different areas of life in terms of waste that you probably would never even have thought of. So I would have never thought about a plant-based diet if it hadn't been for zero waste. So.
Right? I mean, that's really what it does. It's like, it's this little snowball effect where you recognize this one thing and then you just keep going. And every day it seems like there's a new discovery or a new, oh my goodness, I can live without this.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, it's an adventure and it's fun. And in the beginning, I remember thinking like, oh, I'm not going to have anything to talk about or write about within a year. That's so not been the case. So, yeah.
I know. Very true. Now, so on your blog, since we're talking about writing, I just went to Whole Foods, which I don't go to that often for my zero waste shopping. But when I do, I feel like in the past, it's always been something that's a little bit more budget friendly. However, this time, when I checked out, I was shocked because it was way more than I was used to spending there. And then when I compared it to what I could purchase online as the equivalent, it was twice as much money to shop the bulk bins at Whole. And this is for like rice and beans type stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I saw on your blog, you did a really comprehensive look at how this has affected your budget. And you said that you actually saved money, just a small amount of money. Can you talk a little bit about how you make sure that, or how you budget for those items?
So I was surprised. I thought I'd be saving a lot with groceries. But we looked at our variable spending in 4 or 5 different categories. And in some categories, I think lifestyle, which I lumped everything from for clothes, you know when you're just out and you just buy stuff at the drugstore or whatever. I lumped all of that stuff, buying gifts, things like that was all in lifestyle. And we were saving over 50%. But in other areas, I think groceries was where we were saving the least, or I actually, in between the years I was comparing. But I think it's because you still have to eat the same amount of calories. But we weren't losing money in groceries. And I think it's because you just naturally give up a lot of things. So we're no longer buying juice in Tetra Paks for the house. We just drink water, or we make smoothies, or I make almond milk. But I think grocery, and we don't eat as much meat, but we're buying what we call happy meat from the butcher, where we know where it's coming from, but we buy less so that it's affordable, because by nature that's more expensive. But I do find, like, I personally, I don't know of how Whole Foods compares in the United States to Canada, but Whole Foods is like top end grocery store. So I find that you're paying for the ambiance, you're paying for the name, the brand, and I would guess that I would pay twice as much for, rice there as I would as at, another bulk store here for the same amount. So I just tend to avoid it altogether. But
as far as cost effective shopping goes, what Bulk Barn, is that what it's called in Canada?
yeah.
Now that just became a bring your own container store, which is really
Yes.
cool. Do you shop there at all?
Yes, absolutely. I don't tend to like to support corporate business. I tend to prefer to support the little guy. However, Bulk Barn is one of these places that it's a national corporation that's right across Canada, and there are some people in communities that don't have, like, that's their only access to bulk. And in that sense, I also think it's very important to support the change that you want to see. So we shopping up between, like, the little local guy, which can be more expensive because they don't have the buying power that the Bulk Barn does. But yeah, so I tend to split it up, but spread the love. But yeah, the Bulk Barn is fantastic, and we're so proud of them for listening, because it's been the zero waste community here in Canada and Bea helping, that's been poking them to change their policies.
And so Bea is of Zero Waste Home, and that's kind of where we've both, I think I found you on Instagram through I think it was actually through Zero Waste hashtag, which is such an incredible resource on Instagram for anyone that's interested in it. And it's also something that keeps you motivated. You see what other people do.
It's such a positive space to, I feel like Instagram is to sort of share your experiences and have questions, and there's no shaming, and it's just such a supportive community.
Now, speaking of Bea, she has within her book, she has a system for how she meal plan, or how she go to the grocery store, which I followed for a while, and that's really where I saved the most money. That's where I found it was the most effective for meal planning and saving money, is following her system within her book. Now, I know you've been doing this a long time and very disciplined. Do you have any tips as far as meal planning goes, and making sure that when you do go to the grocery store that you do cut out those Tetra Paks and things like that effectively?
So with Bea's disciplined, I love everything about how she approaches this lifestyle. I just can't quite see how it would apply to our that way. So for our meal planning, and I do find when I meal plan, I absolutely save more, but there are weeks where it just does not happen. But what I do is I have a chalkboard in my kitchen, and what I tend to do is I plan out for 4 dinners, and then I plan for, usually my son's lunches are leftovers from dinner, and I plan for snacks and things like that. And our breakfasts during the week, they're always the same. And yeah, so for 4 dinners, because I often find that we've got a meal of leftovers. Living this lifestyle, one thing that we tend to do is we not order out. We tend to go out for dinner once a week as a break for me, because there's pretty much everything's from scratch. So mama needs a break. And then oftentimes, like if my husband's working late or something comes up, me and the kids will do breakfast for dinner one week. So I only plan for 4 dinners. And so I do my 1 grocery shop, and then usually about 3/4 of the way through the week, I have to pop to the grocery store anyways to get a little bit more fruit and veg, and then I can sort of figure out the next 3 days, or if we need something that we're low on. But that's how I approach grocery shopping or meal planning that works best for us.
See, that's what's worked best for us in the past too, I found, is when you give yourself a little bit of leeway there, where it's not everything is planned. And I go back and forth between being incredibly planned and, you'll watch a YouTube video or something like that where a mom meal plans for a month ahead and then goes and buys everything for an entire month of meals. And I don't know how that's possible. And I always feel like less of a mother when I am not able to do that. But
I think if they're not canning, like I've watched those videos too where people are showing how they save like 50% on their grocery bill, but a lot of those foods are packaged and processed, and that just doesn't align with my values. So I've just had to learn to let that go, because eating fresh and healthy and from scratch is more within my value system. So
now, one of the other things that really hurts me as far as making sure that I continue to be disciplined is that I haven't really gone out and purchased all the little items that really support this lifestyle, whether it comes for the home, the kitchen. And I love that your website at Paredown Home, that it includes items like toothbrushes and things for bringing the food back and forth. And one of the biggest things that your website had was beeswax.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yes. The one thing, so originally when we started our website, because one of the biggest problems I think for people, like you said earlier, was access. And I've been lucky enough to live in cities where there's often a little green eco store where I can go and look and see if there is something that would be useful. But a lot of people that live in remote areas, they don't have that access, so they have to purchase online. And so we originally started with a small little Amazon store, but one thing I've learned is that it's very much brand dependent. So you can't always find the brands that I use and know work. And so I was linking people to other brands, and then I was receiving feedback from people saying, this is crap, like it doesn't work. And then you'd feel terrible, because the whole meaning of zero waste is to not, be buying unnecessary stuff. With beeswax wrap, with a number of things. It's very brand dependent, in my opinion. And Abigo, which is a Canadian brand, it's from Victoria, BC. It's amazing. And from what I understand, she's the original beeswax wrap. So, but I have beeswax wrap that's 2 years old now, and it still works. It's ugly now because it's stained, but it still works.
And so this is like it would replace aluminum foil or plastic wrap or something like that, where you could wrap things up?
Yeah, for storage. You can't heat it, it'll melt. So you couldn't put it in the oven. You could with foil. But yeah, it helps. It stores food. You can wrap sandwiches or snacks in it. And it actually helps keep food fresh and stuff. It doesn't breathe. Whereas beeswax wrap, it does breathe. So it still allows for, the leftover lemon ends or whatever it is to breathe. So
well, I definitely I think that would be something really beneficial for me, is to make sure that I have something like that in my home, and I don't right now. Another thing that I thought would be beneficial, that you carry a number of items on the website, is mason jar accessories. I have just a cabinet full of mason jars, which are they're fantastic because they're so multi-purpose. But at the same time, there's certain things that I think would really help us out. So can you tell us a little bit about what your top mason jar accessories are?
Well, I only have 2. I know you can get straws that go in with certain mason jar lids and stuff, but I'm not a person. But it's actually an American company called Kapow. I always want to do this when I say it. Kapow. They make mason jar drinking lids. My husband says that it turns it into like an adult sippy cup, because it kind of it's like an adult sippy cup, or like a coffee cup lid. So you can turn your mason jar into like basically a portable water bottle, coffee mug, whatever. And the canning lid actually sits underneath it still. So there's no worries about it leaking at all. Like you can put your smoothie in with your canning lid, then the mason jar lid, and then you put the screw in your bag. So that's probably one of the things that I use the absolute most. I probably use it 5 or 6 times a week, my Kapow lid. And they also make they turn your mason jar into like a bento box type thing. So if you want to bring a salad to work, you can put the salad in the bottom, and then you put or veggies and dip, and you put the bento sort of separator in, and it's like a little cup, and the ridges sit around the ridge of the top of your jar. You put your dressing or your dip or your yogurt for your granola or vice versa in there, and it separates the wet from the dry, so your food's not gross by the time you want to eat it. So
that is so cool. I mean, that's one of my frustrations, is as far as sending food outside, and that's where I'm most passionate about zero waste, is when you leave the home and how you treat your food outside of your home. So for example, like I just cleaned up the playground that my kids were playing at yesterday, and there was all sorts of little, like the edges of what are those called? Fruit snacks. Like when they
Yes.
tear the bag, there's just thousands of them everywhere. And you notice these things when you start reducing your waste. So my frustration is just compartments, basically. How do I move the food from my house and still keep it edible? So that's definitely helpful. But what do you do as far as kids go when you send them outside of the house?
For like to school or for?
Yeah, let's say to school. So for school lunches, for example.
So I find with allergies and stuff, and the fact that I'm trying to reduce animal products, and the fact that we don't buy dairy, I find sandwiches aren't something that we really do. But I have a couple of those stainless steel little kids containers that have compartments in them. But the biggest thing that I use is a thermos for my son. You can have like a child-sized thermos, and I heat it up in the morning, and it's warm for 5 or 6 hours, and he usually has leftover pasta or rice and veg, so he's got something hot. And then I also send the other stainless steel container with fruits and veggies and maybe a cookie or something like that. So it's pretty. And then they've got a water bottle. They only drink water, and it's funny because when we're out and they have an option to choose juice at a restaurant or something, they often still choose water. So it just goes to show that, they like what they know and what you introduce them to.
That's very cool. Yeah, the food with the kids has definitely been a learning experience for me, and especially reducing meat and dairy and all that fun stuff. My kids, one of my children was old enough to remember when we ate dairy and meat, and so it's been a difficult transition. Do you have any advice for people that are trying to get their husband and kids on board?
I would say so our family has a top 10 list, or each person has my husband and I, the kids aren't old enough, but I would say dependent on age, have a top 10 list, things that you're not ready to give up yet, or that you don't want to stress about finding an alternative to right away because there's enough change just as is. And those are things that you that you still allow yourself. So my husband's got things like, he really likes garden cocktail. I don't know, it's basically like vegetable juice. And it comes in like a plastic container. He buys one of those every 2 months or so, and he doesn't want to compromise on that. He used green bars on his list, and we don't buy them anymore. But in the beginning, he wasn't ready to give those up. And so I have found that having that, so when he feels like really upset that we're no longer buying X or Y or Z, that he can turn to his list and be like, oh, okay, I can still have this and that, for treats and such. So I think that's big. I think my children understand why. So when we're at the grocery store and they want something packaged, or, and then all I have to really say to them is like, well, it's packaged in plastic. And then they're like, oh, okay. And they're over it because they understand why plastic is so bad for Mother Nature. And we talk about it on that level, Mother Nature and the ocean. And I think for older kids, I would suggest getting them involved in, when we started, we had a mason jar. My husband and I each wrote out different areas of zero waste that we were going to tackle, but we weren't going to think about it until we pulled it out of the jar. And at the beginning of each month, we would pull out something new, like focusing on reducing water, or starting a garden, or composting, so we would pick a new challenge, and maybe to have the family come together and sort of write them out together, or to write out individual ones. So
now, as far as I have one last question for you. Social situations. That's another place where I falter, is that I'll just give in. And I know you spoke about this, I think it was on Instagram or maybe Facebook, that I was reading, and I thought, yes, that's exactly how I feel about the whole situation. Bea is very, very disciplined about what she lets into her home, and also how she treats the school. What is your take, and how do you go about removing waste from your lifestyle but still fitting in within society?
In the beginning, I very much tried to adopt Bea's perspective of no waste at all. And I think I found it stressful for me. And I think people around me found it stressful. And because I think people don't really understand, and they're not trying to, not follow the rules. They're not trying to screw you over. So, and then do you want to shame them or point out where they've faltered? So I really struggled with that. And so the way that I approach it now is that I just don't take responsibility for other people's trash. I communicate my wishes. I communicate how I would prefer gifts to be. If people ask, okay, we know you're zero waste, we're coming to your house for dinner, how should we bring this? Then I will tell people. But I think that if we are willing to, people know that I live zero waste. And I think that if they feel comfortable to come into my life just as they are, then they're going to be more relaxed and perhaps open to just seeing and accepting how we live and perhaps being able to integrate an aspect into their life. I find oftentimes people are far too judgmental with these lifestyles. And yeah, so when the kids still come home with artwork, I could probably do a better job of communicating at the school. I think with the next school, I will be a little bit more upfront about the types of artwork that they do or that should come home. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's a very good answer.
Well, how do you communicate it with your friends and family? Is that something that you just came straight out and like made a giant proclamation? I'm zero waste.
Yeah, well, I think that, well, with my immediate family, yes. And even with my immediate family, like my parents and in-laws and stuff, I think it probably took about a year to 18 months for them to fully understand what exactly it was that I was trying to do. And then I found there was really sort of this like light bulb moment where there was this big sort of shift in how they would participate in our lives, which was awesome. But yeah, and I think that my family knows that I blog about this. They know, like, I'm very open about the lifestyle. But I think that even when you're very open, a lot of people are just not going to get it because it's not in there every day, and they're not going to go home and likely Google it. And so I think people will falter, but I think that it's better to just lead by example quietly, and people will just sort of observe. And when you do something different to them, I find that people, if they feel comfortable, that's when they're going to be like, oh my God, you do it that way? And, or why do you do this? And what is that product you have? And I think if you're gentle in your approach, people feel more comfortable to ask questions and then, be more open to being like, wow, that's awesome. Maybe I can do that. I think that I guess the biggest thing that I've embraced over this journey is progress over perfection. And I find, especially on Instagram and stuff, and I think a part of the zero waste that's appealing to a lot of people is the minimalism and the aesthetics of it. But that doesn't happen overnight. So don't get discouraged. It's progress over perfection. And don't beat yourself up because you've started on a journey that's about doing something positive. So, be kind to yourself and stay positive, and one foot in front of the other.
Katelin, where can people find you?
Instagram at Paredown, or paredownhome.com is my website, my blog.
Thank you so much for doing this, Katelin.
Thank you so much for reaching out. It was awesome.